We're live.
Look at us
Welcome
go.
to Let's Talk Markets Live. First first episode of 2025. Happy New Year to everyone, unless you're not having a happy New Year.
Right.
That's
And
your
a sad New
choice.
Year to you.
That's your
Yeah.
choice. I'm
hmm
not here to dictate anything.
Exactly. So
How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing great. I was just in Calgary. So
Hey,
we
all right.
we yeah,
Really cold, eh?
we went to it's beautiful. We went to Banff, we went to Jasper, we went out to Golden,
I've always wanted
and
to ski Banff. How was it? Did it live up to its
I didn't ski there because my back is
oh,
still completely screwed. So
damn.
unfortunately, it was mostly just like hiking and stuff. I can still do that, thankfully. So the skiing, like the slopes looked cool though, but they were mobbed.
Yeah.
Mobbed.
All right, so like I from time to time I get on a soapbox about antitrust and concentration issues, and
Right.
I'm gonna do that with skiing because
Good.
private equity has absolutely ruined skiing. Vail is just the devil, and I say that as someone who, when I was like in college, I went out to Vail for the first time, skied out west with a bunch of college buddies, and had the time of my life and thought it was the greatest place ever. And I've skied out west a few times. Every time it's been unreal being from the East Coast, just unreal
hmm
skiing.
hmm
And now I just can't get over what is happening to skiing. The cost, the insanity of like the pictures you see on Reddit of these multi-hour lines to get on a gondola. Like, what's going on? I don't even understand.
So interestingly, the number of skiers is exploding. And when I say skiers, I mean skiers and snowboarders, like the number of people frequenting the mountains. So a lot of these places, they literally have to expand. It's a big part of owning ski resorts
Yeah,
is
you got to
actively
expand.
expanding. Yeah. But
I mean,
I
you have
agree.
some knowledge here, right? Like
Yeah. Yep.
you
A little bit
you
here and
know a
there.
little bit
And
here, right?
yeah, and it's really, really interesting because the other thing is just the advertising has been really, really effective. So we have
Interesting.
tons of people that are
Yeah,
going out for the first time, or they think it'll be fun for a weekend, and then you overlay the fact that people tend to have the same weekends off, and so on and so forth. So it
for
just
sure. Yep.
compounds to be because the funny thing is if you go places like Vail and whatnot, you'll find periods throughout the year where they're dead, relatively
Yeah.
dead. I mean, there's
Yeah.
still people shredding, but yeah, it lightens up a lot. So it's super interesting. That
Yeah.
industry is fascinating.
Yeah. Here we
What's
are in Ottawa, skiing on a little hill, when it's 10 degrees out. Much to my kids' chagrin, but they get on the mountain pretty
right?
regularly,
They
and
get to
they
ski.
man, they shred. These kids
Yeah.
are so good. I love it. I'm so happy.
Oh, it's so sick too, because especially when you're small, there's two things that help you a lot with that. The first thing is you're fearless because you don't
Yeah.
know what you don't know yet, so you're
Yeah.
good. And the second thing on top of that is your frame is still small. So the falls are kind of whatever.
You've
Because I
got
remember
you
when
know,
I was
you
like,
don't have very far to go. So
it
I always
doesn't
tell
even
my kids
matter.
that. Yeah.
There's not a lot of mass to mess you
No,
up. It's a
that's
beautiful
right.
thing. You just watch them mobbing around. What is also a semi beautiful thing is as soon as I left Canada, your best friend Trudeau has made a decision. Your BFF
No
Jill
way, man. I'm
Trudeau.
so all right. Okay, so I am one thrilled that he resigned. I'm
Okay.
surprised. I thought he was gonna be pretty stubborn about it. But here's the thing. Here's what he did. And to you uncouth Americans who don't
Uh
understand the
huh.
parliamentary system, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. But he prorogued, I think that's how you say it, Parliament, which means like they can't do anything now until March. So like the country is just paralyzed. It literally can't do anything, and then it's going to come back and it's going to like come back in March, and the rumors is going to prorogue it again. It's like it's crazy. Like one dude can just shut down the whole government. How is this even possible? I don't understand. I mean, look, I come from the U.S. This parliamentary stuff is new to me, and for a while I thought it was way better because you end up with more diversity. You get smaller parties that get a couple of seats, and you get interesting coalitions. It leads to more compromise. But then, like, one dude can be like, no government for 2 months.
Awesome.
What?
It's awesome. Every system has to have its quirks, right? It's like everything can sound good in theory, and then you realize that a dude can
Yeah.
leave you a parting gift that cripples you for 2 months. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I
This guy's like, stop
absolutely.
talking about skiing. Hey, we're not talking about skiing. We're talking
It's
about the
perfect.
Canadian parliamentary system.
Now
I
we're on
mean,
to politics. Don't we'll find something to piss you off. Don't worry about it.
yeah.
We'll dance between enough of these and make everybody angry.
And see, here I wanted to start this conversation totally differently, Eric, because
You
I
know
wanted
that.
to ask you, yeah, about your exercise regimen, which may be of probably of no interest to anyone who's tuned in right now either. Um,
Good.
but I promise we're going to get to all sorts of interesting things. We're going to
Oh
talk
no.
about GameStop and the Chicago Stock Exchange for sure. We're going to talk about Nvidia. We're going to talk about, a
You mean
bunch of
that
other
that dude's
things.
wearing like an alligator skin jacket?
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, so here, this guy says my unhappy new year was Jensen Wang's choice. Yeah, yeah, alligator skin jacket guy.
We
Yeah,
we were we
sorry,
were
Nicholas.
we were watching a little bit of the CES stuff last night. Fun fact, I was watching it without the sound so that it didn't get like taken down, but they still just took it down for a copyright strike. So they're real touchy about that stuff. But yeah, but I've never seen like a happier CEO in my life. That dude
Yeah,
absolutely has adopted a straight up rock star persona. It is
yeah,
hilarious to
yeah,
see. I cannot get enough of it. Like, this is a dude that literally runs a tech company talking about chips. Like, how dorky can it be? And then he
yeah,
comes out in like alligator skin jacket, and it is so cool watching this dude just having a ball being the rock
yeah,
star of the
yeah.
show. Yeah.
Man, when you're that rich that quick, I mean, not quick, like Frank, like he was working on it for 20 years, but boy,
Uh-huh.
did it happen fast when it finally happened. And
Yeah. Well,
it's so cool. He's like, he's frankly helping to revolutionize the world and the technology industry. It must be a great feeling.
Well, he also gets to have the feeling that essentially none of us dudes ever get to have, which is that feeling of being the hot girl at the bar, where everybody wants to come up and talk to him, and
Right.
everybody's just vying for his attention, right? Because most dudes, you go to the bar, you're just forgotten about. You go play pool with some dude that has no teeth, and then you bet $5 on a pool game that goes
Jesus,
over way too fast.
where
Yep.
are you playing pool?
Oh, only the nicest establishments, obviously. Yeah, I mean, Driftwood? No, that's anybody from the East Coast. It's like a military strip club that's like right off
Uh,
base. It's exactly what you would expect it to be. It's called
which,
literally called the Driftwood.
which base?
So Quantico. So it's on the East
All right.
Coast.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
was, I was,
nothing.
I mean, I wasn't near Fort Dix, but I was, in the same
Yeah,
state as Fort Dix. That's the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the one.
Yeah. So I'm actually excited to talk about that whenever you feel like it. But yeah, that's going through CES. I'm fascinated by new technology, by literally things that are going to revolutionize what I perceive to be our world as we know it. And
Hmm.
Nvidia shared a fascinating graphic. I tweeted it yesterday, or I X'd it. I don't know what we call it still. And it essentially shows like the ecosystem of everything that they're involved in. And
Hmm.
everything that's moving forward with this AI driven solutioning, whether it's from self driving cars to general robotics, NVIDIA is in it. Like, they're in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, one, what an interesting investment opportunity for a longer term thesis.
Yep.
Two, you could just see how many industries are about to get turned upside down. They're everything from coding, like, it's going to be incredible. I'm stoked.
Yeah. 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 It was inspirational. It's really just like, it's one of those times it feels like where the future is here, right? And it's
Yep.
happening around us. And for those of us who have been in tech for a long time, like we've seen this happen. We've seen this happen a couple of times. I've actually been in and around AI now for like 25 years, being that like in college, that's what I studied, and I was worked in an AI research
So
lab.
cool.
And it's even before that, you saw what these AI cycles come around, that there would be so much hype, and then none of the tech would live up to it, and you'd enter what was called the AI winter. And this happened a
Okay.
couple of times around various technology. Like there was evolutionary algorithms, and there was early forms of machine learning. and now we're into this like phase of deep learning, and I'm still sort of, I don't know if it's that I've been around that too many times to kind of fully buy into it. I have some very deep-seated skepticism, no pun intended, around deep learning, and I think it's probably going to hit a wall. And it's almost like we're seeing that, and it's funny to be saying that when you're seeing Sam Altman's shtick right now. I don't know if you've seen this, where he's
Yeah.
like, we're working on AGI.
Yep.
It's here. We're working on super intelligence, and it's like, yeah, what are you're raising money right now, aren't you? That's why you're saying that, and
Right.
so and apparently there's some clause in their contract with Microsoft that if OpenAI does achieve AGI, suddenly they don't have to share their revenue with Microsoft anymore.
Lols. Love
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It's all that stuff. The Sam Altman stuff I find to be complete and total BS. Just you can ignore the stuff he's saying. The Nvidia stuff I find to be much more credible because it's they're building hardware. The hardware is working. It's actually empowering these technologies today. And it's much harder to sort of fake or speak and wave your hands around that kind of thing. So yeah, like
Yeah.
when he's giving that speech and he's talking, I know exactly like that image that you were talking about. It's really amazing. It's really amazing to finally see this start to happen. And Mike, great question. Like, are we still too early? And it this is the earliest of innings. Like the other, I think like the other AI waves were sort of like the preseason, and now
Mhm.
the season is just starting. And I still think deep learning and LLMs have some really just inherent limitations that it's going to take a lot to get past and to actually get to true autonomy of AI systems and true, like these agent-based AI systems where maybe they can really augment what you do. For some of us, they really do augment it on a day-to-day basis. Like I still have to code and do data analysis from time to time. And
Nerd.
man, yeah, I'm proud of it. And these things are amazing. It's like if you're coding and you have this AI next to you, you have a junior coder working for you who responds instantly, and you get like that's the quality of what you get back. You get back junior coder level stuff, and then you fix it, or you tell it to fix something, or you tell it to optimize something. But it's incredible to have that, and it the acceleration that it enables in the kind of stuff that I do is definitely groundbreaking. And I think, I did see a post by someone from OpenAI, which the point they were making was that what these systems are best at are math and coding. And that's the kind of sort of fundamental acceleration that you're going to see result from these systems. So yeah, Mike, like we're very early. It's the earliest
Mhm.
days, and that's why I think from an investing perspective, it's very exciting. I don't know about investing in Nvidia, putting new money to work there per se, but I'm never going to tell you to not invest in Nvidia. Like that's it. I've what an incredible trade and what an incredible investment it's been. What are you seeing, Eric, in the options market when you look at Nvidia? Are you trading it pretty actively?
Here and there. So I had direct exposure to it for a little while. I was trading with like a ratio call diagonal. It's interesting to see companies that big move the way that they move. They move almost like
Yeah,
mid cap
that's
companies,
crazy
which is
volatility, right?
it's insane. It's literally insane. So to that question, there was another thing that they talked about Nvidia specifically, and I thought they put it beautifully, where he was saying that AI is about to have its chat GPT moment, like General Robotics is about to have its chat GPT moment. And I think that's cool because in terms of your explanation of like the ebb and flow of AI, as I hear you talking about it, it makes total sense to see early technology without institutional support that's kind of like proving itself, ebbing and flowing in interest. And then you get to a critical point where there's something not even close to the finished state, but
Yeah,
something that's usable
yeah,
broadly.
yeah.
And I
Exactly.
mean,
That's right. Yeah,
and it looks like we're starting to see that because exactly to your point, if you're using Claude, Sonnet, GPT, Perplexity, whatever it is, these are all, in my opinion, still so early stages,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
super usable and still massive accelerators.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Just if you know
yeah,
how to use them, if you know what they're good at, you can lean into that. Just know they make shit up all the time, right? Like,
you can't trust them. You can't trust them.
understand
That's
that, right? Exactly.
yeah, and they're going
But
to sound super confident.
right.
Yep. They're
And
yeah,
then very
they're
apologetic when you point out
yes.
you just made something up. You're sorry.
Yep.
You're so
Yep.
correct.
I can't believe I would do this to you.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
I know robotics is so exciting, and I got this is another thing I always like to brag about this. I got to work with Boston Robotics years
Okay.
ago for a
Yeah.
while. I
Kind of
got to
scary.
like, yeah, I got to drive some robots
They make
and
me
see
uncomfortable.
oh man, what they do is just incredible.
Yep.
And if you look at like some of the stuff they're doing, like with their warehouse technology, yeah, that's like an example of something where, and there's competition there now for them, and that's what I think AI is doing. It's accelerating the viability of smaller players. So to
Mm.
my hope is that AI can be one of these great competitive equalizers that lets smaller firms compete at a similar level. But at the moment, right, the investment is massive to build your own AI systems. And so there's a risk that, and again, like I tend to boil down issues often to issues of concentration, to problems with concentration. And the thing you don't want to see with this new incoming government is that they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they say everything this past administration did was bad, which is not true, right? Because
I see.
the antitrust work that the FTC and Lena Khan spearheaded over the last 4 years has set the ground for an economic transformation of like a competitive explosion in the US in different industries. And AI is exactly one of those where we need competition. We do not need simply a handful of incumbents owning and running the industry. Unfortunately, like Nvidia is one of those, and you want to see them face competition because competition is what will make them push harder and make things better and cheaper. Competition is what fuels the US economy. And too often, incumbents use regulation and government influence to capture industries rather than letting them flourish. So, all right, that's my soapbox for now.
Why do you think, though, that smaller companies with something like AI would be any better positioned at this point to compete? Because to me, I don't see it any different than what the financial industry did, credit cards and stuff like that, where exactly to your point, they've created such a wide moat through regulations and whatnot that's very difficult for smaller institutions to meet. So they regulate their way to a moat. Why wouldn't that happen with AI? Because I'm
Well,
thinking
that's the
if
danger that we're facing right now.
but you were saying that you think that it's more like there's a potential for like these smaller companies to compete. But from my perspective, I look at it as there's just going to be a bunch of smaller companies that are trying to start something that's even moderately viable in the hopes of just getting the paycheck. And for Nvidia to reach out and say, either we don't want to
Right.
compete with you, we're going to buy you, and you take your $500 million and you just go float off and do whatever you feel like.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking more from like the perspective of users of AI,
I see.
right? So I
I see.
can take, this technology, and if I'm a small, company with a few people, suddenly it's like I have a ton of people,
Right. I
right?
see.
And suddenly I can compete. I think the vision for a lot of the industry is this idea of AI agents, and that's
Mm-hmm.
I think something that was said. Um, I don't know who said it. I hope it wasn't Sam Altman. I think it was Jensen. But
They did. They had a whole section on it during their
yeah,
presentation
yeah.
about
See,
AI
I missed
agents.
that part. But
Yep.
that's the thing that like this year we're going to see actual AI agents employed and
Right.
working alongside humans, and I think that is a very exciting sort of inflection point where it becomes less about the size of your company and more about how cool your idea is, and now you can move fast, much faster than you otherwise would have been. You're not as resource constrained as you would have been, um, and I to me that's really exciting.
Speaking of inflation, which you just obviously went over so well, is do you view that kind of rollout of technology that was inflationary?
Um, no, I don't think so. I don't see how it would be. What is there? Do you see a mechanism for that? I would think this is the kind of thing that, I don't necessarily see it yet resulting in a situation in which it's replacing people. I think it kind of sits alongside people for a long time. So
Mhm.
to me, that's more about productivity than price levels, and that we're going to see further sort of knowledge worker productivity increases.
And where do you think that cascades? Because obviously, like, for example, I don't think companies are going to be like, hey, you work for us 40 hours a week, 45 hours a week on average, whatever it is. And now that you have AI, you only have to work, 30 hours as long as you get your job done. So,
Yeah,
like, there's going to be another,
probably not, right?
exactly. So there's going to be another 10 hours of something that's going to happen there. What do you think about, like, what does that turn into? Is it just gross more productivity that then bleeds into the overall system, or do you see
Yeah,
something else
yeah.
happening
No,
at that
I
time?
think that's very much it. Like, now that I have those 10 hours back, I'm going to do other stuff with that 10. I'm going to work on much more, human-centric tasks. I'm going to strategize. I'm going to,
Cause drama?
be cross trauma, right? Be
Yeah,
creative,
go talk
that
shit
kind
to
of thing.
somebody. Yeah,
Talk shit. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I, The reason why I ask that is this coming year, I think one of the main themes that all traders, investors, I don't know what investors do. That just seems boring to me. But whatever traders are out here doing, I do think the perception of inflationary pressures is already under a microscope. And every time we have more and more things, technology, variables entering the system, a lot of it is going to be analyzed through the lens of, hey, e-minis are flat now. Who would have thought
Yeah.
that?
They were close to
Um,
unch
yeah,
when we
literally
started,
sitting
right?
flat.
How about that?
Um, but as I think about primary themes throughout the year, there's obviously a lot to be done with technology. There's a lot to be done with AI. Don't really think like AGI and stuff like that. That to me seems like what you were talking about with AI 15 years ago, where that's probably still very, very much in its infancy. Even though, what is it? Microsoft, was it Microsoft or Google with Willow? Forgot
Yeah,
who.
Google. That was Google.
Google.
Yeah.
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't impressed. That was
No,
another
well, I
like, here's it doing something, very like this very narrow task that sure it was better than humans at, but that
sure.
that doesn't really speak to me in any sort of generalizable way.
I
Like,
mean,
yes, we know computers are better than humans at certain things, and with quantum computing, sure, like, there's like with Willow, which was the quantum computing,
yep.
it's great. Like we're making some advances, and now we have a quantum computer that can do something that classical computers can't. But is that generalizable in any way? Is Bitcoin at risk? Is
Right.
cryptography? No. The answer is no. We're nowhere near that. And these companies, they really like to hype what they're doing for all sorts of reasons that are in no
Sure.
way related to the actual technology.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you because when you look at that, you think of like what's the broad scale applicability of it,
Yeah.
and you compare that to what Jensen was talking about with the new updates to RTX, where they cut the price of what was it, like the 4070, the new 50 series or whatever is now like $550, and it used to be like $1,400 or whatever
Yeah.
it was. For a lot of people, that's a huge
It's a
difference in
big
terms
deal.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of adoption. Like that's a big deal. So that, like, that element of this coming year, I think, is going to be really, really important to keep an eye on from a trading perspective as we see these different technologies coming out along with the broader economic framing, because that's been about as bipolar as I could imagine. It's like every time we get a new economic report of some type, the market is having this visceral reaction, which is really
Yeah.
interesting to me. I honestly wouldn't have expected that level of volatility at this point because it has seemed to be a very steady path so far.
It
Like
has
not a lot
been.
of
Yeah.
shocks. Yeah. So it's like that pricing is really interesting to me. Do you think that that's participants just doing their absolute best to try to front run? And if so, I would expect them to be a little more accurate than they've been. If not, yeah, it's like, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it like a lot of this volatility, you'll see it happening on non-human timescales, right? So you
Mm,
see it as soon as these things hit, and these automated systems are trying to interpret it fast as they can, and they're trying to interpret it from sort of like a both geopolitical and macroeconomic perspective, which is a bit much to ask for automated systems.
right.
Um, so I think a lot of it is just sort of what's called event-based trading, which is this news trade. And generally, I mean, at least I'd be interested in more in your perspective on this, because like as I'm watching things, I see like a cluster of volatility, like a flurry of it, and then we're back on track, right? We're back on
Mhm.
our up and to the right. And it seems like nothing can stop these markets when you just take a step back and zoom out just a bit.
I literally couldn't agree more. I find the recent volatility has been really interesting. So, for example, on using SPY across, we'll use average true range. A 90-day average true range was about 1%, 20 days 1.3, and a 5 days 1.5. So we're still seeing short-term vol sticking up like quite a bit. To me, it looks like the market is at a hell of an inflection point where it's going to have to make some decisions.
Mhm.
And it's still posting higher lows after the drop that we felt on, when was that? The 18th of Dece. So it's still maintaining like the broader disposition of a rally, but it definitely is like coming into a consolidation phase here,
Mhm.
which is
Mhm.
why I think the positioning for traders is so important, because these are the exact moments where if you don't top ticket, bottom ticket, you get out of it all right. But what's really not good is if you completely misplace your risk and then it makes a big move one way or the other, as you're trying to place your bets.
Well, to what extent do you think that move is coming later this month, right? Like we have this turnover in administrations, and say whatever you think about Trump, it is not entirely clear what exactly he's going to do. And
What
I
do you
say
mean?
this from north
He's
of the
like
border.
He's
uh,
like he's really communicative, pragmatic, clear. I feel like everybody
Predictable, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's you always know what he's gonna say, right?
Right.
Before he talks, you're like, I know what's gonna come out of this guy's
Right,
mouth.
exactly. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like what when you think about like from Jan 20 to March 20, like the first 2 months, or you want to put it out 3 months, the first 100 days of the Trump administration, sure, like there are a few things that are coming. The Congress is working on border policy, and the extending the tax cuts and cutting spending. So fine, this stuff we all know, but when you think about tariff policy, for example, what's going to happen? Is
Big
there
deal.
really going to be blanket tariffs on Mexico and Canada, which
Big deal.
are the US's largest trading partners and would be a
Yeah.
massive inflationary shock? Would he do that, or was it just posturing, right? Like, and so how is the market looking at 2 weeks from today, or not quite, right? 12 days, which is the Jan 20, which is the inauguration. And then how is the market looking at the next 3 months for the first 100 days of the Trump administration? What does the options market tell you about that?
I'm literally looking right now. And interestingly, I don't see a big spike in vol there. I
Hmm.
see a larger spike in vol in the 17 Jan expiration in SPX, but it's not that much. Like front vol right now is
Interesting.
25%. That's for today. Tomorrow's like 4.5%. And then it goes into like the mid teens. And
Hmm.
it's that essentially all the way down the chain. It doesn't get
Wow.
out into the 20s until like 112 days, 30 April, 16 May, which is actually really interesting to me. Because
Oh,
to your broader
yeah.
point, my expectation, to be completely honest, is I think most of that stuff is priced in at this point. I think the best guesses are because, and when I say priced in, I have to think a lot of it is priced in off of, I know a dude who knows this dude who talked to Trump about this, and this is what's coming.
I've had
But
several of those conversations.
yeah, yeah, and it's like you have enough of those people, trying to make decisions and positioning off of that. That's my best expectation of what I can see, because What's interesting on top of that is the call skew in terms of total open interest compared to puts. It's, in SPX, for everybody's awareness, normally there are more puts open than calls. And that put skew exists because people will use SPX to hedge a basket of holdings, right? So very standard to see more puts than calls. But what we can do is track the ratio. So even though there typically is more puts than calls, we can see how many more and how does that ebb and flow. And right now, it's lighter than I would have expected. So it's almost ceteris paribus prior to election. So I don't know. To me, it seems like the market's not really thinking any kind of way about it, because I would have framed it as thinking the market is waiting to see what happens here.
Yeah.
And if the market's doing that, I would expect to see vol higher. And it's not. So it almost looks like the market is saying, I kind of feel like I know what might happen here, and it's nothing that big.
So this is a very reasonable perspective, which is we've been through 4 years of this. We know what's going to happen, and we expect the next 4 years to look a lot like the first 4 years.
That's what it seems like, which is really interesting. Yeah, because I just would have expected a little bit more vol further out, but it's not there right now. Don't worry.
Well,
the markets have an uncanny ability to make us all wrong simultaneously, even if we have offsetting positions. So whatever you think is going to happen, you're going to lose money, right? You can feel confident in that.
All right, we're going to switch gears. This was the question I got by far the most when I posted on whatever it is called now.
You have to say the name.
Yeah.
You have to give a shout out to the person.
Twitter. No, I will not give a shout out to that guy.
Okay, well, suck it, Kenny boy.
Suck it. Oh, I got to say that name. Yeah. So, suck it, Kenny boy.
Here we go.
Has a question. Curious to hear your thoughts on the high GameStop volume on the Chicago Stock Exchange. I have a pretty simple thought. This shit's weird. Have you looked at this at all? I don't know if it only happened the last 2 days. Now I'm gonna take a step back. I know a little bit about Chicago Stock Exchange, and my knowledge is extremely dated. So I used to be a high frequency trader, and I worked in Chicago. And we traded at every exchange, and then there was Chicago. Chicago was a weird fucking place. Every exchange server was in New Jersey, except for Chicago, which was at Cermak, which was outside of Chicago. I mean, it was the Chicago Stock Exchange, right? So they had their servers in Chicago. There was nothing that happened there, because by the time you got to Chicago, whatever order you had seen that you were trying to hit was gone. So we would send orders to the Chicago Stock Exchange. Like, let's say we were going to go sweep the book. Okay. We would hit every exchange in Jersey, and we would know we were going to get, like, I used to get very high 95% fill rates if I went to go sweep the book across New Jersey. And then you would just throw an order over to Chicago, and you would know you had like a 10% chance of that order getting filled. And it was when you marked these sweep orders, you had to mark your orders as ISOs, intermarket sweep orders, to get to disable any of the inter-exchange routing for Reg NMS. And again, like, you would have to make sure you sent that order to Chicago. You'd have to document it, need the audit trail, but that's it. Like, it didn't matter because you would never get hit. So Chicago was always like this weird exchange off in the distance that nothing happened at, and there was never really any trading volume. And that has been the case, except for like a couple of times in GameStop's history, which I've seen some analysis done that found a couple of days where some volume at Chicago preceded some pretty big price movements. And that there's not enough data there to say it's statistically significant or anything. So who knows about that? But suddenly, the last 2 days, 10% of GME volume has been at the Chicago Stock Exchange. Now, that all of that being said, the Chicago Stock Exchange is no longer the Chicago Stock Exchange, and it's no longer in Chicago. Okay, it was bought by NYSE. It's now NYSE Chicago. In fact, it's MIC code, like the code that it's used to refer to, that you refer to it with, is no longer like CHX. So some sites still have it as CHX, uh, just like some sites still use like some weird FINRA codes, and like other sites refer to ARC as the Pacific Stock Exchange because that's what it used to be. But it's no longer in Chicago; it's in Jersey. So the NYSE Chicago servers are in Secaucus and NY4. So there's no more of the Chicago as like this weird off in the distance endpoint either. And I've seen people ask me, okay, but what about this interconnectedness between the CBOE and Chicago Stock Exchange? But that's not a thing. That doesn't exist. CBOE owns 4 stock exchanges, the BATS and Direct Edge exchanges, and then they own the Chicago Board Options Exchange, right? Um, they have nothing to do with NYSE Chicago. There's nothing that says that, like, if you're going to execute contracts and accept delivery for an options contract from CBOE, that it has anything to do with the CHX exchange or NYSE Chicago. They're totally different companies. So all of that said, do you have any insight? Because I don't really have any. I'm like, this is sort of all I know about the issue, and I don't see anything that says that there's anything here other than, wow, that's weird.
To be honest, you're the guy that I would ask. Yeah. Because I'm looking at I dropped a link in the internal chat for a website that shows volume by exchange. Yeah.
Yeah,
And this is
chart
off exchange.
yeah.
Yep. And I I really have no idea. So it
Yeah,
looks
and
like it started
that's
on
what,
the
today?
third.
So like there's nothing much trading at Chicago today.
No, it plummeted. So
Yeah.
the third was super quiet, 0.07%. And then the sixth was 10.3%. And then it dropped on the seventh down to 5. And then it's just, yeah.
Yeah. Weird, right? That's all
Because
I got for you guys.
Because the other thing is that it coincides with a dip in overall off exchange volume, the spike in
Yes, I
Chicago.
saw that. Again, it's the dip in off exchange volume was still sort of normal. Like, it was still a normal value. It wasn't like it went from 50% to 20%, right? It went from like 53 to 48 or something. I think is the one I saw.
And well, the other thing I'm looking at is that the other exchanges didn't contract much. So it looks like net ad volume for off exchange based on this chart. Like, I'm not seeing a massive crater that compensates in the other exchanges for when Chicago spiked.
Right.
So is there a world from your day as a market maker where why would I do that? Like, why, as an institution or a market maker, why would I tap into not even Chicago necessarily, but just like a specific exchange if I wanted to move a bunch more volume as compared to just using the open channels across other exchanges as it exists?
So if I'm gonna trade a large amount of volume, I have to take that volume where it's displayed. So the only explanation is that for some reason that volume was sitting in Chicago, and for some reason, as someone was sweeping the market, they hit it. Now, I tell you this, I did right before the call, because I had seen this question, I went into the SEC's website and I looked at SRO filings for Chicago. And I see that last month there was a fee structure change, where they went from a take-take exchange where they were charging 10 mils a side to a make-take exchange where they're paying a big old rebate to provide liquidity and charging a big fee if you want to take liquidity, just like the other big exchanges. So most exchanges in the U.S. are maker taker, and they pay rebates or payment for order flow if you provide liquidity, and you have to pay a fee if you want to take liquidity. NYSE Chicago did not do that until last month. So something did change last month at NYSE Chicago. Um, does this have anything to do with various programs that the New York Stock Exchange runs? Are they starting to consider NYSE Chicago volume in some of those programs for liquidity replenishment points or supplemental liquidity programs? I don't know. I don't think so, but I have no idea. I didn't have enough time to really dig into the SRO filings at the other NYSE exchanges, so that's probably something to look at. But I didn't come out with any kind of smoking gun or anything other than to see that there was this fee structure change last month.
Interesting, because I'm looking at unusual whales now, and I'm just looking over the last 2 weeks. What was the overall dark pool premium on average per day? And obviously, as you would expect, there's a series of really large orders on the 7th. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I see 7 that are over $1 million. And out of the last 2 weeks, there's been 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's been 11 orders in total over $1 million. 7 of those were on the 7th.
Interesting.
Yep. So that's Spanish for I have no freaking idea what's going on, but weird.
It's weird, right?
Yeah.
That was my response to Welp on Twitter. I was like, that's freaking weird.
Yeah. It's
Welp, I wish I
now.
had some more insight. Like my hands-on high frequency days, that knowledge is dated, but Chicago is always like an outlier and a weird exchange. Now I can see that they had a fee structure change recently. You're seeing some blocks trading on dark pools, so somebody is moving size,
Yes.
and that in combination with the fee structure change, which might have meant that there was more resting liquidity at Chicago, because if they're going to pay a
Right.
giant rebate, they're going to attract much larger resting orders. And so if someone's moving size, they're using algorithms to do it. Those algorithms are hunting dark pools for counterside liquidity, and they're trying to see if there's any hidden liquidity on exchanges, which Chicago is paying now a rebate on hidden liquidity providing as well. So, there's something going on. I don't know if Chicago as a venue means anything outside of this just happens to coincide with a fee structure change and somebody moving size, which clearly is happening at the moment.
Yeah, and it's not really sympathetic with the options market.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So just to clarify on the fee structure change, and so this was, when was this? December 11th. Um, and usually these fee structure changes are immediately effective, which is why I think it would have been effective, but this actually doesn't say anything about it being immediately effective, which might mean it's not. But it does say that currently the fee to provide or take liquidity on Chicago is 10 mils a share. They want to change that to 30 mils to take liquidity and 29 mils to provide liquidity. And so 29 mils would be one of the largest rebates out there. It might be the largest. That delta
I see.
is 1 mil a share. So if you remember, maybe you don't, but if you remember the SEC's Reg NMS rule proposals, they did a study on exchange fee structures, and they found that the average exchange take is 4 mils, as in the average between what they charge for taking liquidity and what they pay in rebates. The average is 4 mils, and usually, and often more because I know like it can really span. It can go generally up to 9 mils. That's how the exchange makes money on trading, but they don't make a lot of money on trading anymore. They make more on data. But this is a 1 mil net take. And so if they're all charging 30 mils and Chicago's paying 29 mils a share for a rebate, that's going to make a big difference. So,
when did
I don't
that
know if
rule
you can.
when did
Yeah,
that rule go into effect? Because
so
if that's the case, then we should see that sustained in Chicago, shouldn't we?
should. So that was December 11th was the rule was proposed. It says comments are due by January 7th, so they were due by yesterday.
Interesting, because on the 11th, Chicago was at 0.16%, and on the 12th, it spiked to 2%. So that to me seems more
so there you go.
happenstance
It
than
must have
anything.
been
But
immediately effective.
well, why would it be so peaky?
Chicago fee structure.
I mean, I guess the peaky could make sense because there's not going to be those, as we were looking at the dark pools, there's not going to be those big orders all the time. So it might be when somebody is looking for a big order, they're now generally incentivized to go to Chicago, provided that they can get the liquidity there. And then if they can't, they might have to cough up the premium somewhere else, because like NYSE ARCA saw a massive spike on the 19th into the 20th. So that might just be that they had enough liquidity for the order, which is why it wouldn't have gone to Chicago for the cost savings. Does that sound right?
Yeah, so here you go. The fee schedule at Chicago, at NYSE Chicago, as of January 2nd, reflected 29 mil rebate for providing displayed liquidity, a 14 mil rebate for providing non-displayed liquidity, and a 30 mil fee for taking liquidity. So that absolutely was effective when all of this occurred.
And it makes sense because that's
why aren't we seeing it persist?
Well, I think
that's a good question, but
this
is just coincidental that it just so happened that people were posting those kinds of orders when someone was moving size.
That's what I think. And I think that's why it would have gone to Chicago, because we can see, looking across the exchange volume from prior timeframes, any stock, but especially GameStop, is very peaky, but it'll be peaky in specific exchanges typically. And I can see that looking at this chart. I'll post it on X as well so everybody else can see what I'm looking at. So based on what you're explaining, that would make sense to me, that it seems like there happened to be somebody that was moving some size that was able to find the liquidity that they needed on DHX because this is the largest order as a percentage of deal flow, or order flow, I should say, for GameStop, essentially for the last, 6 months? So it would make a lot of sense. But the overall spike is nowhere near the largest GameStop has seen in the last 6 months in terms of orders. So I think that actually makes a lot of sense, because it'll probably be more concentrated going forward, I bet. Yeah.
So what I think actually we have made some progress in figuring out what happened over the last few minutes. So, Chicago proposed a fee structure change. That fee structure change became effective this month. And within a couple of days, someone's moving size. And it happens to be that Chicago's paying the biggest rebates. So the largest size out there is being posted at Chicago as well.
I think that makes sense. And we'll be able to validate this going forward, because what we can do is just eyeball this for the next couple of weeks, see when the next round of big order flow comes in, and see where it's concentrated. It'll be difficult, I think, to directly isolate it. We'll have to track the overall volume, because that'll be the other factor involved here, I think. Right? Is like, does Chicago offer enough volume with the rebate in order to get the order filled?
Yeah. Now that Chicago is actually in Jersey, it's got a chance, because I'll tell you, when it was actually in Chicago, forget about it. You couldn't hit any order that was sitting in Chicago.
Well, it's Chicago. It's got a lot of weird quirks. They do weird pizza in Chicago. It's honestly disrespectful pizza. I would go as far as to say.
Get out of here. Get your crazy food opinions out of here.
Are you
It's
serious?
I
You're gonna hold
love
on.
that
Not
deep dish and I love that New York thin crust. It's all great. How can you not love? Oh man. You
for
ever been to
somebody
like
that's so smart, I would expect you to be much more refined in your disposition.
I'm from Jersey, dude. I'm not
I
refined in
thought that
anything.
you would be more in line with Da Vinci. Simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. Meanwhile, you have me
Yeah.
trying 92 types of Wagyu beef that's been
Yeah,
massaged
man.
by a dude, and it
I've
still
had
tastes like
pizza
crap.
in Naples and in New
So have I.
York and Brooklyn and in Chi-town and in Detroit, and I
Same.
love every single one of those pizzas. Man,
No, you
do I
don't.
love pizza.
No, you don't. Nobody does that. That's false. Brooklyn, really, really good. But Chicago, there's no way. There's no way you're
Oh
convincing me
man,
of
do you
this.
know they make what is it, Lou Malnati's? They make a gluten-free pizza, which is just like a giant sausage with sauce and cheese. It's the greatest thing that there is in the pizza world. I'm sorry.
Nothing like taking the pizza part out of pizza.
Yeah, they're like,
That
you don't
essentially
want
becomes
gluten?
like a
We're gonna get rid of the
lasagna.
crust. Forget about that crust.
It literally becomes like a lasagna.
Yes, it's so good. Lou Malnati's. I love Lou Malnati's. How can you
That
not
is
love
absolutely epic. I love that.
them?
What did you think of our friends over at Hindenburg with Carvana?
Yeah, Carvana. All right. Switching gears again to what do they
You
call it?
know that I am literally the dude of abrupt
Smash and
changes.
grab.
As soon as my brain changes,
Yeah,
exactly. It's
forget about
next.
it. Right? All right.
Yeah, there is
So
no
yeah,
segue.
these are the kings of the smash and grab. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a very high opinion of most short sellers. I think they use a lot of devious techniques, in all sorts of ways.
You mean like taking a position, publishing research about the thing you took a position in,
Yep,
disparaging it, and then
yep,
now
or reporting it
question
to the regulators and starting investigations based on nothing, and then leaking the existence of those
uh,
investigations. That happens quite a bit, and then those
Mark.
investigations, nothing happens with them, but the damage is done. They're
We
these usually spoofing, layering, and other forms of market manipulation accompany all of these tactics and techniques. I'm not accusing anyone in a specific name of doing anything. I'm just talking in generalities.
about
And
short sellers, yeah,
I have to be careful about the things I say on this topic because
I
I'm
don't.
involved in all sorts of um, actions on it, and I don't want to jeopardize any of those. But
Don't worry,
you
I
know,
can be the unhinged element.
go for
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
But so on an interesting note though, for before we get into like what we actually think, as you know, I am statistically minded. It's how I like to analyze the world. So we looked at a track record of essentially all of Hindenburg's higher research pieces to see what the efficacy is behind
All
their
right.
calling a short. And then there wasn't that many of them that I could actually get good data for. I want to say there was like 34 tickers or something like that we saw that ended up being pared down a bit, but I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it absolutely was a clear majority where they were correct. They were correct like 70% plus of the time in their assumptions, which is really, that's a great hit rate for anything. And when you talk about the potential, again, to your broader point, because I don't know either. And as much as I like to joke around, I honestly wouldn't cast stones at something that I don't know about. But the idea of some of that manipulation going on in those different forms might make such a good hit rate make a little more sense
Yeah.
because you look at a hit rate like that on such a small sample, because that's the other thing. Small samples, as you know, will be very prone to skew. But when you're trading things from the long side, you tend to have a couple pieces of wind at your back, positive drift, expanding economies, those kinds of things. You generally have something working in your favor that might explain some of the accuracy. They're the other side of this, where you have to be precise in order to be correct. You're literally fighting the headwinds, which is really interesting. So,
Yeah.
what do you make of the argument that they made about Carvana? We read through it, and as always, their research is super thorough. It's a long, long article. It's well documented with their sources and stuff, which I always appreciate from like an analysis perspective. But what'd you make of it?
So Carvana is a funny one, because when it like okay, so if you look at the chart, right, it's a really crazy chart over the last 5 years. Pull up a 5 year chart of Carvana, and holy hell, like what a trader's dream, I think. It, the 5 year chart starts at like I don't in the 20s or the 30s. It peaks at 360, drops back down to below 20, back up recently to 270, and now it's down trading around 200, 197 when we're talking. And I will tell you this, that in 2021 and 2022, when it was falling like that, I was like, yes, that makes perfect sense. From everything I know about Carvana, this company is a complete fraud. And so when it fell like that, and that's not based off of anything other than knowing people who had interacted with it and how insane their experiences had been.
What do you have any? Because I actually don't know anybody personally that
I do,
worked.
yeah, a couple.
Yeah.
Like one of the, like they just think like this company selling cars that they had no idea about, didn't know how to price them, and then if something was wrong, one of my friends bought like this car from them, didn't pay half of it, and they transferred the title. And there was like no contract signed, and there was no
He got the
paperwork.
car.
And he's got, yeah, he got, you know, and then they came to him and they're like, "You owe us money," and he's like, "What are you talking about?" And there was like nothing they could do. So it was like this really poorly run, completely disorganized operation, that just it really seemed like the kind of thing that shouldn't be in business. And when it was teetering on the verge of bankruptcy, I was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Um, and then now, like, okay, so uh, according to Hindenburg, right, they were facing bankruptcy in 22 and 23. Suddenly, the stock spiked 284% in 2024. But they're saying that there are all sorts of loan sales with undisclosed related parties. Insiders are cashing out. It was trading at like at 845% a higher sales multiple relative to online car peers, CarMax, and AutoNation, a 754% premium on a forward earnings basis. They have almost $5 billion in net debt that's rated junk. And then, you have the other side where like JP Morgan is saying, yeah, it needs to be more transparent, but their earnings per unit sold aren't inflated. BTIG is saying like these are just rehashed concerns that have already been absorbed by the market. And if you look at the market reaction, like, yeah, okay, it came off quite a bit, but certainly the uptrend is still intact. And it's not like it's on its way to zero at the moment. And I don't know what, maybe it's just a dead cat bounce. Like it's a pretty vicious move down. Seems to have bounced
Yeah,
back
like
up quite a
15%.
bit, right? Um, so what, if you look at like the 3 month chart, it went from 260 down to like 170. Now it's back up to 200. So maybe it's a dead cat bounce. Maybe it's like, Carvana and these investment banks pushing back has moved the needle. And that's, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say from the outside. Like, yeah, the report looks good, but it's only one side of the story, of course. But if I have this inherent bias that I am shocked this company didn't go bankrupt in 2023.
Yeah. Yeah, really. And also to add on to what you were talking about, it also has been a soft used vehicle market for some time now. Like used vehicle has not been a strong element of car sales. So they're
And
seeing this
they've
crazy
just
growth.
been so expensive, right? Like
Yeah.
so much of inflation came from used vehicle sales
Yep.
because there just wasn't inventory, there wasn't supply. And so yeah, the volumes were down, like you're saying. Um, and so yeah, I mean, like I'm not gonna ever sort of stand up and say, "Oh, Hindenburg, like they're trustworthy. Yeah, let's see what they have to say." I don't. I I think there are short sellers out there that I have respect for, and these sort of smash and grab ones aren't those. And I think there are a lot of investigations still going on years later, and we haven't heard anything much from the DOJ on this, but I know that these guys were certainly the subject of those investigations. So it's hard to say what's going on right now there.
Well, as you know, from the trader's life, I don't give a shit. I just traded it to the downside as soon as I saw that report come out because I put some calls out. I put some short calls out, and then I added some long puts because I was just like, after I saw their hit rate being so good, I was like, I'll ride that coattail. I don't really care. So that's the beauty about being a trader. Is I really, it's the craziest thing. If you think about the life of a trader, I look at red and green candles on a chart, and then I just throw money behind things I know nothing about. And then I cross my fingers and hold on and hope something sick happens. Pretty awesome, to be honest, but it makes no sense. It's all fake. Market's up a little bit. What do you think of that? Turnaround. Big turnaround. Futures are up right now. Markets, futures are up over 0.15% for E-minis. Qs behind it just a little bit, about 10th. And then the Russell. The Russell is still... The Russell reminds me like when you take your overweight, out of shape friend for like a moderate hike, that everybody's just kind of like having a conversation, talking, and then like that person's fighting for their life, just trying to maintain the walk. Like that's what feels like is happening in the Russell right now. It just feels like it's trying to hang on.
What about Fannie and Freddie? You in on this trade?
No,
man,
I've got nothing there.
Fannie and Freddie going nuts. So
got nothing there.
Is in November, Fannie Mae was trading about $1.50. It's trading at 480 right now.
Love that.
Yeah, people think that the government's going to step back and that Trump's going to privatize it, and these things are going to go off to the moon. So
interesting. Yeah,
take a look at that. FNMA, FMCC. Maybe you'll have some fun trading those.
I know it's a spot, like one, it has no options, so it inherently is not interesting to me.
Oh yeah, and that's right. No
two, things that have, things that are closer to penny stocks. I don't have a big account, but like smaller stocks are tricky with that stuff. Even with like a moderate size account, all of a sudden you start noticing that the market's like, okay, you're going to pay up. We'll see what that's what you do. Exactly. You're like, hey, thanks for letting me see your pockets. I think there's a little more in there. Let me see what I can.
What I did. Yeah.
That's like, those kinds of things. They're always fun to watch because if you want to talk about being able to trade something like volatility, that's where it is. It's super illiquid. It's pure slop. Nobody else can get into it because it's so cheap OTC. And you're like, just looking at it, and you're like, I could do something, but then you just can't put on anything that's like reasonable sized. So you just kind of watch it and you're like, that would have been fun. At least would have been a wild ride, but huge move.
Nice. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up there. We've gone slightly over an hour, although there was, quite a bit of talk of skiing and.
To everybody's dismay.
I know. Yeah. I just want to, just for the record, this was one of our first comments of the stream. Stop talking about skiing. So if you missed the beginning of the stream, you really missed out. Jump on the recording, check it out. Eric,
let us know if they're right. Let us know if they're right.
Yeah,
I'm curious.
Should we never talk about skiing? Do you guys not want to hear my opinions on pizza and steak? Like what I
can tell you nobody needs your opinion on.
Nobody wants to hear your opinion of my opinions.
Those are trash opinions.
Get out of here.
Those are trash opinions.
Oh, all right. Well, listen, my smoker is cranking out the brisket these days, so don't worry about anything up here.
Good.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. Always fun to have you on Let's Talk Markets Live. Check out Eric at Outlier Trading, wherever you are, YouTube and Twitter, X, whatever it is. And I don't know, you in other places, or is that about it?
That's plenty.
That's plenty. Yeah, that's more than enough for anyone. And check our stuff out, Irvin Finance on YouTube, Twitter, even some Blue Sky these days. So hope to hear your comments on this stream. Let us know what questions we can answer next time. like, subscribe, all that. And thanks for tuning in. Happy New Year to all of you. Even if you're not having the happiest New Year, it's going to get better. That I can be sure of.